First FanBest webinar will be an introduction to the series coming up this week, and it will provide an overview to the blue economy trends and the subsectors. So I'll just go through the agenda quickly before we start. My name is Pauline and I work at the Greater Manchester Chamber of Commerce. I'm part of the international trade team, and I'm also part of the sub-team managing the FanBest activity at the Chamber. I'll just do a quick introduction to the webinar and to the program, and then I'll hand over to Boris from Atlampol, one of the partners on FanBest, who will provide the overview to the blue economy and tell us about the subsectors and trends. We'll then hear from Bevan from Hydrowing Limited, who are developing scalable tidal power, and he will tell us a bit more about his experience as a business in the blue economy and some of the support he's got from the program. And finally, we'll hear from Ben from the Value Engine, who's also a FanBest business coach, who's been working closely with ourselves at the Chamber and the University of Exeter in the UK, supporting businesses looking to grow in the blue economy, such as Bevan, a Hydrowing. We'll then open up to a Q&A panel. Please, can I ask you to keep yourselves on mute? And that's reminding me that I need to record. So just 1 second. Oh, no, it started, sorry. Please keep yourself on mute until the Q&A. If you've got any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. One of my colleagues can pick it up if you've got any technical issue. And if not, we'll just pick everything up at the end and go through all the questions together. So as mentioned, this is part of a series of 3 webinars, which will be taking place across the next 3 days. As mentioned, today will be an introduction. Tomorrow, we'll go into more details on business support organizations, specializing in supporting businesses within the marine industries, such as incubators and clusters. And on Thursday, we'll look into private sources of funding. We understand that access to funding can be challenging for businesses in the blue economy, especially at early stages. So we'll hear from 3 private organizations who have worked with or are specializing in helping businesses in those industries, from banking, crowdfunding, or private investment organization. So while these events are aim to provide information and raise awareness of the opportunities for all stakeholders in attendance today, they're also a platform for you to ask questions and share best practice or share your experience. So feel free to use that time at the end of the session to jump in and ask any questions you might have. So just a quick word about ourselves at the Greater Manchester Chamber of Commerce. We're one of the partners on FanBest, and we are leading on the organization of this series this week. We're the largest Chamber of Commerce in the UK with over 4,600 members. We cover the whole of Greater Manchester, and we provide a wide range of business support services, either for domestic growth or international growth. I've put some more information here, but I'll just move on to the next slides. So these events are organized within the framework of FanBest, which is the Funding Atlantic Network for Blue Economy Technology Transfer, and it focuses on the technology transfer strategy to the SMEs from the Atlantic area, which are linked to the blue economy by creating a super network of public and private entities. As part of your pack for this week's events, you will have received a flyer that has a bit more information about the project and what we do, and you also had an option to opt in to find out more about to sign up to our newsletter and receive more information. But basically, the project priorities are to improve the information about the financial needs and the potential of technology transfer, the access to funds to finance adoption of innovation and R&D results, contributing to the creation of new innovative products and services, and so on. There's more information on our website and on the flyer that I have sent, and I will include more information as well in the follow-up of the event. The project is funded by the Interreg Atlantic Area Programme, which is part of the European Regional Development Fund, which supports cooperation addressing shared regional challenges and innovative approaches to strengthen territorial and sustainable economic development. We've got partners as part of FanBest across the 5 key areas that you can see on the screen. We've got partners in Spain, Portugal, France, Ireland, and the United Kingdom. And I'm very happy to see that today we've got delegates from all around those 5 key areas, and really hope that this is useful for everyone. So this is just an overview of who the partners are on the program. Thank you to everyone who's joining. Thank you to all 3 speakers that I mentioned earlier for participating in the event today. And I'll just now hand over to Boris for his introduction to the blue economy.
Thank you, Pauline. Good morning, everyone. Shall I share my screen?
Or you can just tell me next slide.
All right. So good morning, everyone. So thank you again to the Greater Manchester Chamber of Commerce for the invitation on the organization of this webinar. So my name is Boris Teyant. I work in France at a public institution that is basically dedicated to coaching entrepreneurs across multidisciplinary areas. And myself, I focus on blue economy related projects. So most of the projects are highly innovative. You will see some example across the slides. And today I will be quickly going through the main trends and the main sectors within the blue economy and trying to also highlight some of the key innovations that we see in France and across Europe that are pushing and changing the blue economy sectors. So if we go to the next slide, please. There will be three main topics I will address in this presentation. I will give you a few figures to start with. Hopefully it won't be too boring, but I think it's important to have some of the key numbers in mind before we go into the two different type of sectors we see in the blue economy, some that are relatively mature, well-established sectors, and then we go through the more emerging and new sectors. So on the next slide, just first a very quick definition. What we think and what we mean with blue economy is basically any economic activity related to the ocean, directly or indirectly. And I should actually go a little bit broader than the ocean itself. It's also the seas and the rivers that are crossing the land. So it's any marine-based or maritime-based economy. It actually weighs more than 5.4 million jobs in the EU. That's including the UK actually, and it also have a very large impact in the gross added value. This number, 650 billion a year, may not speak to you, but you have to realize that it's more or less slightly bigger than the whole aeronautic industry in Europe. So it's quite big, and it's also growing faster than almost any other sectors in Europe. So if we go to the next slide, just a few main concept about the sea, the oceans, and what do they represent. So I think we are all well aware that two-thirds of the Earth is covered by oceans and water, basically. We probably are a little bit less aware than within these waters lies actually a very, very vast biodiversity that is not that well known yet. And within that biodiversity, among other things, there are also very interesting therapeutic molecules. And they can also, I didn't mention, but there are also molecules interested for the agro-food industry or other sectors. Obviously, there is also a large energy resources within those seas and oceans. Fossil fuel, historically, it's all of the world stock today still represent 20% of the world stock of the oil sector are offshore, and 37% for the gas sector. And I think many of you are aware that we are now already tapping some of the renewable energy sources coming from the seas and oceans, and globally they represent potential exploitable capacity 10 times over the world electricity demand. And finally, some of the stakes that are maybe a little bit less well known, 90% of the world trades are transported by sea. That means that any good you see around you, any object around you is extremely likely that it has traveled at some point across the ocean. Maybe not the object itself, but at least in the process of fabricating it or in the logistical aspect, it has been through the seas, very likely. Also, 1 million kilometers of optical fiber are crossing the oceans, and this is actually a key aspect for telecommunication. It's equally important to have some satellites over our head than having those cables to have internet in our houses. And also, yeah, all of the data is depending on those cables, subsea cables. So next slide, please. This is two very quick slides to remind us all that the ocean is also an ecosystem services that provides many things that are basically indispensable for our lives, human lives. So it produces, roughly speaking, half of the oxygen we breathe. It actually absorbs nearly 1/3 of the CO2 emissions that are globally emitted. And it also helps mitigating climate change and some of the consequences of climate change, such as the rise of the seawater level by natural protections and so on. And on the next slide, please. Obviously, I think most of you have already heard that it's also an ecosystem that is being, under some kind of crisis for some aspect at least. Nearly half of the coral reefs have already bleached, and almost 1/3 of the quota of type of fishes are overfished and needs to be controlled and more regulated. Something very well known is that there are plastic all over the places in the seas and the ocean, and that represents roughly speaking almost 1 dump trunk per minute being dumped into the seas. And as I already mentioned, also the trade through the maritime transportation represent quite a big chunk of CO2 emission. So now I will go over the next few slides through the more well-established sectors, the mature blue economy sector. And if we go to the first sector, here again, I didn't want to put too many numbers. There are many reports, EU reports, that can give you a nice and clear view of what is at stake in terms of economic development for each of the sectors. But I wanted just to highlight a few of the main information from my point of view on a few of the main key innovation trends I see in each sectors. So the first one is coastal tourism. It actually represents almost half of the jobs in all of the blue economy sectors across Europe. It's mainly composed of SMEs, and Spain is largely dominating the sector globally in EU. And some of the trends we see is obviously trying to offer new services, a new type of entertainment, I should say, when using a type of leisure boating. So dive, surf, and fly. Obviously, diving and surfing are quite old activities, but they are evolving quite rapidly. And flying, as you can see on the bottom left pictures, there are more and more leisure boats using foils to make them fly. Also, one of the key trends we see is integrated management and slow tourism. We can put them together. It's somehow trying to make sure that we control and we regulate a little bit better the way we use the beaches and around the coastal areas in terms of managing the flow of people, and also in trying to update and modernize the offer for tourism with different approaches and different services. The next sector on the following slide is about what we put together under the name marine living resources. So behind that you have fishing mostly, but the whole value chain of the fishing from the capture until the distribution. Here, I think some of the importance EU key policies are related to the stocks and trying to set up the right quotas to make sure that this resource is sustainable over time. And one of the key discussion at the moment around Brexit also concern the fishing industry. And in terms of innovations, some of the things we see is improving the selectivity of the fishing nets and fishing tools to avoid bycatch mostly, and also avoiding capturing too small fishes. Also improving the evaluation of the resources. It's a big topic. Trying to make better use of the byproduct of a fish. Depending on the type of fish, you may have more than 70% of the fish that is not actually ending up in your plate. So there are many properties within the bones, the skins, and so on that could be could be better exploited to use in cosmetic or other type of industry. Water quality is a big topic, and safety of the fishermen especially is also a big topic for innovation. Next sector is the energy, and the historical energy resources that has been exploited at sea is obviously the fossil fuel industry. So oil and gas, as I mentioned before. This sector is nowadays decreasing slowly but surely, and it will most likely continue because of lack of investment, and also because of it's getting more and more difficult to extract oil and gas, because the most accessible and the easiest places offshore to extract those resources have been already used. But there are also innovation. Despite the fact that this sector is decreasing, and one of them is actually to use all that experience of putting heavy duty industry and platforms at sea and heavy logistics to transfer it into the marine renewable energy sector. Also trying to make the best of extending or reusing some of the offshore platforms that are over there, and also trying to transfer the know-how of subsea activities from this sector to different more emerging blue economy sectors. And if we go to the next slide for one of the, I would say, trans-sectorial sector for the blue economy is obviously related to ports and all the logistical aspect around the ports. Any activity at sea will have at some point to go through a port, whether it's tourism, fishing, or trade. So it actually play a key role in all of the sectors. Most of them in EU are publicly owned. And I would say continuous investment is really key, because they need to adapt to the more emerging sectors and need to adapt to the regulatory framework as well. So here we see two big trends. It's smarter ports with different type of digital tools and digital transformation overall to provide new services to their users, and also green ports, obviously trying to evolve in terms of offer of energetic uses at the quayside, but also improving the energy efficiency management of the port, and so on. And I think next slide is going to be the last mature, well-established blue economy sector. So it's the shipbuilding and repair sector. It's obviously quite a historical sector in EU, with some world leaders that have been there for many decades, that are being challenged quite fiercely by Asia in particular. And nowadays, mostly in EU, the leading I would say shipbuilding companies are mostly working in highly specialized ships. The most basic one are usually being constructed outside EU, because it's more difficult to be competitive. And some of the key trends are, I would say, quite similar to what we see for the ports. So, but also more related to the manufacturing aspect. So trying to bring some domotics and robotics to the yards. Also the use of new materials. I would say bio-based materials, but not only, and also trying to improve I would say the end of life of the ships and the maintenance strategies. And if we go to the next slide, I think, yeah, there was, this sector is very linked to the previous one. So it's the maritime transportation. I'd like to remind everybody that shipping is actually the most carbon efficient mode of transportation. And this is because of physics. It's not because of economics, it's because of physics. It's simply because Archimedes helps transporting heavy goods compared to aviation or road transportation. So what we saw over the past few years is, and what we continue seeing, is like the increase in ship sizes. Now there are container ships that can actually carry over 25,000 containers. So it's absolutely massive. And some of the key policies, especially coming from the International Maritime Organization, are really driving the change of this sector. And it's similarly to the ports, can be summarized into two aspects: green ships So changing the propulsion mechanism with more, I would say, carbon-friendly technologies such as wind propulsion, hydrogen in the future, maybe ammonia or electrification as well, but also improving the energy efficiency of the use with routage system and so on and so on. And also we have digital tools that are flowing and changing this industry to improve the safety, but also to improve the services that can be offered to the client of the maritime transportation. Now I will go quickly through the more emerging sectors. So the first one on the next slide here, unlike the mature sector, I prefer to give you one concrete example of a company that I'm actually helping in France that is involved in the specific sectors I want to highlight. So the first one is aquaculture, but in a sense, new aquaculture. Obviously, aquaculture is not a new sector. We've been doing oyster cultivation for decades now, but there is new aquaculture companies mostly working going offshore or going inland compared to the most traditional aquaculture companies that were working in coastal areas. And here is a company that is trying to cultivate gambas without using any antibiotic, without rejecting any pollution, and without having any deep freezing across the value chain until the consumption of the end user. So it's basically an inland system that is cultivating in a closed circuit environment. And it's been created by two women that are specialized in marine biology and one man that is working more on, I would say, commercial activity. And they are nowadays working on the pilot project has already been produced. They have already sold hundreds of kilos of those gambas in Nantes because the first production line has been deployed there, and they are now going to move to the next step where it's going to be a pre-industrial industrial scale I would say basins cultivation scheme, and it's going to be deployed over the next 12 months more or less. So it's a multi-million euro investment, and some of the key trends in the more global aquaculture, new aquaculture sector is also working on the feed. One of the most impacting in terms of I would say environmental impact is the feed that you provide to the shrimps or the fishes in the aquaculture, and there are many innovation here, including using some insect and also multi-tropic, which means trying to combine different species and having different patterns and different needs so that they can benefit one from another. The next emerging sector I want to highlight is the Blue Biotechnologies. So it's basically trying to exploit some of the molecules that hasn't been really used so far in different type of industries that can be within the pharmaceutical industry, the health sector, but also in the agro-food, also in the cosmetic sector. Those are the main sectors being targeted by Blue biotechnology companies. Here, some of the main molecules, I mean, many of the molecules being exploited at the moment are derived from algae. It's not exclusive, but many of the companies working in the Blue Biotechnologies are actually working on algae, microalgae and macroalgae. So the big one on the tiny one. And here, some of the key trends that are still needed is a lot of research is still to be done in exploring the biodiversity in the algae, but also more globally in the molecules that we can find in the water, seawater, or even non-seawater. So this is a lot of research has to be done in terms of finding out what can be exploited from those molecules. Also in the engineering to improve the global efficiency of the production system. On the picture here on the left, you see a production of spirulina that I think many of you know. And this company, AlgoSource, is actually exploiting specific extract of the spirulina that are being used in the health sector. They are currently going through a phase 3 clinical test. So it's the last step before commercialization to use some of these extract to help preventing some of the second effect you can have when you have some type of cancers. The last key trends in the blue biotechnology sector, I should say, is trying to go more into high added value product, because otherwise in some other sectors it's difficult to compete. For example, some of the early stage microalgae companies were looking at producing biofuels from algae, and there are still some working on that. It may be a solution in the next few years, but it's more difficult to work on this type of sector because it's already very competitive and massively produced. And I think I have another couple of emerging sectors. So the next one is maybe a little bit more well known, is anything related with renewable energy coming from the ocean. Here you can think of exploiting the wind. Of course, I'm sure all of you have already seen pictures of videos of offshore wind turbines. That's already a reality. You have to think that currently there are more than 2,000 wind turbines running in the North Sea, mostly in Europe. So UK is actually leading this sector by far. But also you can think of exploiting the waves, the tides, also the thermal gradients between the surface seawater temperature and the deep sea water temperature, and also the difference of salination across the sea column. So here I just picked an example of a company that is the early idea was to develop a massive wave energy converters to compete ultimately with offshore wind. And this company exists for nearly 10 years now, and they have pivoted. They decided to stick to relatively small wave energy converters. You see one on the picture there, to provide autonomous small power or small to mid power consumption needs at sea. So for sensors mostly, and they have now deployed over 30 of these buoys measuring winds before you actually decide to put wind turbines, commercial wind turbine parks. This is a requirement to actually measure the winds for at least 1 year campaign. And they do also stabilization of ships. And some of the key trends here for this sector to grow more quickly is to improve reliability. Anything you put at sea has to be more reliable than if it's inland. And acceptability is also a key issue. Some of the wind parks that are being constructed currently in Europe, they have been through over 10 years authorization and permitting process. So this is a very big issue for the industrial players behind that in terms of management. Next sector, next slide, please. So this slide is just to say that obviously I haven't been, I would say, exhaustive, but there are other sectors that are emerging and that are already becoming a reality. Cbed mining, controversial topic, but there are many companies working at least on the exploration phase of trying to understand better what's in the deep sea. So over 2,000 meters, we still know very little about the environment down there. We know there are many minerals of interest used especially in the electronic industry. And we know also that those minerals are going to lack and are going to be big geopolitical concern, because mostly they are produced in China at the moment. Desalination obviously is a big topic to produce water for remotely based population. And I didn't mention the defense sector, but it's also, I would say, both a well-established and a very high innovative sectors. And I will finish just with one last example of a company that we've been supporting for the past 3 years. So I think it's been created in 2018. And I think it covers a different type of the blue economy sectors I mentioned so far. So this company originally is trying to doing what we call biomimetism. If you see the fish on the right-hand side here of the slide, this fish is mostly based in tropical waters where usually the water is very, very turbid. So the typical senses that most fishes use to find their way under the sea are no longer possible for this type of fishes in those locations. So basically they cannot see anything and they cannot use sonar type systems to find themselves. So they have naturally developed a system that is called electrical sense. So that means they emit themselves magnetic field around them, and their brain is finding out when they are getting closer to an obstacle, how far you are from it, and what type of material is it, and where you should go to avoid it, or where you should go if you want to actually get it, if it's a prey for you to feed yourself. So the whole idea of the company is trying to replicate this mechanism into subsea robotics. And today they have demonstrated that this can be done for different type of application. And actually it's especially interesting for subsea buried cable detection for the offshore wind industry. Many of the, I would say, maintenance issues happening in the offshore wind industry are related to subsea cables. And if you put some of the sensors that have been developed by this company around underwater electrical vehicles, you can actually have a higher accuracy in finding out where the cable is, how deep it is, and where is the actually the damage being done. That will help planifying the maintenance intervention. And they have recently been awarded a €2 million grant from the European Commission. So that's a good news for them. And I think that's my last slide. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Boris, for the presentation, and thanks for sharing more information about the case studies and the companies you've worked with. I think it's very interesting to see this apply to actual businesses. So next, I'll hand over to Bevan from Hydrowing Limited.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Pauline. Yeah, if we can go to the next slide. So yeah, just a quick introduction of myself. I'm Bevan Ray from Hydrowing Limited. I'm a project and innovation manager at the company. So working on our active projects, developing our technology, and also trying to find new opportunities for public and private investment to take our technology through the development stages, ultimately the goal being to large scale deployment, comparative with the sort of offshore wind farms that you see today. So we are a renewable energy company. We focus on tidal energy. This is tidal stream. So I'm sure you all know that the tides come up and down. We see that all around the beaches around the UK coastline and all over the world. But as the tides all come up and down, they also move horizontally, so back and forwards. We called that the ebb and flow of the tides. And that's the energy which we harness. So much like a wind turbine uses air for its blades, we use the flow of water to generate electricity, all based on the same concept. And this is our technology that you can see on the screen here, which I'll describe in more depth later on. If we can go to the next slide, please. So just a bit of background on us as a company. So we're based in Cornwall in the UK, the southwest of the UK, in Falmouth. Our managing director is Richard Parkinson. He's the founder and managing director. He's been in the offshore sector for well over 30 years, starting in the oil and gas sector on large anchor handling vessels, moving oil and gas platforms around. He's then moved out of the sector, worked in Greenpeace for a short while, which sort of exiled him from the oil and gas sector. And then over the last 15 years or so, he's been working in the tidal sector. It's quite a young sector, only been sort of looking at real scale deployments over the last 15 years. And Richard and the team here, over that time, sort of developed best practice for installing, maintaining, recovering tidal energy devices, and have worked with pretty much every device that has been designed and tested over the last 15 years. And this has accumulated in Richard and the team deploying around 60% of Europe's total installed capacity. Using this experience and the wealth of knowledge over that time and working with so many different devices, we as a company decided that we would start developing our own technology, which we feel better tackles some of the challenges faced by the sector. If we can, and there's just a few examples on the bottom there of technologies which we've worked with in the past. Unlike wind energy, the tidal energy hasn't really converged on a single type of device. So you've got some which look very much like your wind turbines, large rotors, maximized blade diameters, and others which, for example, the one in the middle here, which is a kite technology, which flies in a figure of 8. So very novel, innovative sector, which is still developing towards commerciality, really. If we can go to the next slide, please. Just to give you an idea of what the market is for tidal energy. So it's a global market, albeit it isn't as big as offshore wind will be, but it's still estimates of 500 to 600 gigawatts. To put that into context, that's around 15 to 20 times as much offshore wind capacity as we have installed to date. So it is a very large market. The UK is at the center of this market. It's the world leader. It has been since the sector was born. And we have some of, if not the best tidal resource in the world. And that can total up to around, if we were to exploit all our resource, around 20% of UK electricity demand. So by no means a small figure. And yeah, Europe in a whole, again, is a hot spot. So 10% of Europe's electricity demand, and on a global scale, around 5% of global electricity demand could be met by tidal energy. Tidal energy exists anywhere really where you have obviously coastline, but more importantly, where you get constraints in tides. So around islands, headlands, obviously that's why the UK is one of the best locations for this. But our major markets are outside of Europe, are in the Southeast Asia, Canada, and also down towards Chile as well. They're our target markets as we stand, but ultimately as a company, looking to harness all of these markets to maximize the growth and potential for our technology. If we can go on to the next slide, please. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of the challenges before I really go into what our technology is. My slide seems to have messed up a little bit here. Sorry, everyone. But as a sector, as I said, we're quite new. As a sector, we're quite new to the renewables landscape. Offshore wind has been going for about twice as long as the tidal sector has. So we're still trying to drive down the cost curve to make ourselves competitive with other types of energy, whether it's nuclear or offshore wind, obviously being the target goal to become competitive. But some of the main categories of challenges, I would say, are political and technical. Political is obviously a bit more out of our hands, but as a sector, we are coming together to try and get the political support that is needed to make tidal a focus and allow it to scale up. So the challenge in the past has been that the focus for upscaling renewable capacity, green technologies, has been on wind and solar. obvious reasons. You can do it onshore. Anything onshore is always going to be cheaper than going offshore, really, unless you can really go to excessive scales of size. Yeah, I mean, it's spelled out on the screen there, so I'll move on to the technical challenges, which is what our specific technology is trying to tackle. So through our experience, we've found that the main technical challenges of the current technologies in the sector are cost and complexity of installation and operations and maintenance procedures. We're operating in the world's most dynamic tidal environments with speeds which are going faster or as fast as most of us can run. So trying to hold a very large steel structure and deploy it in these environments is a challenge, and there is inherent risk tied to that. The second major challenge is power reliability and availability, ensuring that you've got technology which you can deploy in a subsea environment and will perform reliably for a prolonged period of time is key for commercial success. And all of these technical challenges really circulate on each other. If you have an unreliable device and you're having to intervene, a lot of the time this creates a cycle of negative sort of well, cost incurred, which doesn't help the scale up. Thirdly, cost of turbines, foundation, balance of plants. This is mainly due because of the scale of the sector. We're producing very bespoke equipment. Once you start to get to large scales of deployment, economies of volume, this challenge starts to fall by the wayside. And finally is commercial scalability. We've seen in the offshore wind sector that starting small is the best way to de-risk your technology, but ultimately you need to be going to these large devices which can be deployed reliably. If we can go to the next slide, please. So just a quick animation to actually introduce you more to our device, to sort of set the groundwork for the sector and where we sit in the sector. Hopefully it will play. There we go. Hoping you can all see this on the screen. If not, then you can find it on our website, which is hydrowing.tech. But our technology is quite different to what you would imagine, I can assume. We've got multiple rotors, small diameter rotors. So these are about 10 meters in diameter, placed on a subsea foundation. The whole idea behind our technology is that it's been designed around a reliable, low cost, easy to implement installation and O&M procedure. This is one of the major cost drivers within the sector. We have these vertical corridors which allow us to access the wings which the turbines are situated on during any point of the tide. This allows us to keep the weight of the individual lifts very low, which means we can access readily available and low cost vessels. We've actually acquired our own vessel now to further drive down the cost of that installation and O&M. And we're finding that our O&M and installation costs are around half of offshore wind once we start to get to scales of 10 to 20 devices in the water. Some advantages, so because we've got multiple rotors on a device, it means that if there is a turbine failure, which ultimately there will be at some point over a 20-25 year lifetime, we can isolate those single turbines and the remaining turbines can continue to generate, which is obviously a big advantage for power reliability. We have wet mate connection systems, which essentially means we can lift off the wing and plug it in. This eliminates any need to handle cables as was mentioned previously, in the offshore wind sector, cables is one of the major failure points in wind. It's the same in tidal. So eliminating any need to handle those cables is a massive advantage. And it also reduces our time to deploy and recover from around 12 hours to around 20 to 30 minutes, which in a tidal environment is crucial. If we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so I just wanted to cover how we've benefited, or the work that we've gone through with FanBest. So we've worked with Ben Rotherway, who is going to speak after me, I believe, and to work on improving our sort of commercial route forwards. We know and strongly believe that we've got a good innovation. What we're trying to do now is to demonstrate that innovation and scale it up to the point that we're providing electricity on a large scale. So we wanted to develop a strong business case, a clear business case, which we can use to get public and private investor funding. So this was looking at the whole business model, mapping it out, getting it onto paper, and providing clarity there, essentially. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So Ben worked with us to go through some sort of standard business modeling using the business model canvas, which you can see on the screen here. So this was identifying the key partners, our key activities and key resources that we need to allow us to evaluate what we have in-house and what we don't have, and where our key strengths are, or our key propositions, which you can see in the middle there. And then looking into what are the relationships we need with customers, partners, and what are the key segments which we need to target, and ultimately what that means for where our revenue streams will come from and our cost structure. So this really provides a map of our business, and we use this to find where we've got strengths and weaknesses, which is on the next slide, I believe. Yes, so identifying our strengths, our weaknesses, and then from this, working with Ben to see what we can eliminate, where we don't need to focus resource and effort on, and where we can increase resource and effort to raise or increase or create new value within our company moving forwards. Next slide, please. And then finally, this whittled down into specific actions which we can take, which you can see on the board here. So increasing our IP, protecting our innovations and technologies so that we can have freedom to operate and to scale up competitively. Yeah, I won't go through them all. I realize that I'm going over time slightly. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, and finally, just the benefits of coaching. It's been a really useful experience to sit down with an expert, an external person as well, which I think it's always good to have someone from outside your company's bubble to come in and provide that sort of independent viewpoint. Ben is extremely good at what he does, and it's been really useful. Our team is mainly engineers. We're not really don't have that sort of the business training expertise, so having Ben's input was really good. It's provided our team to get training and coaching to the point that we can repeat this process now internally, create new business models, test new business models, which is allowing us to move forwards and progress. And of course, it's identified key actions to strengthen our business and service offering. So yeah, just a thank you to Ben and to the FanBest project for providing support to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Bevan, for providing us this overview. And it's, as I said, interesting to hear from actual businesses having gone through all this, and especially with the support you got from Van Best. So thank you for sharing. I know we had one question in the chat, but we'll cover it in the Q&A just after Ben's presentation. So over to you, Ben.
Sorry, Pauline, I'm muted there. Are we okay to share the slides?
Yeah, so here you go.
Okay, firstly. Well, firstly, to introduce myself, my name is Ben Rother. I am the founder and managing director of the Value Engine, and I've been working with several companies, such as Hydrowing, to provide this innovation coaching. Pauline, can you go to the next slide? Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to quickly talk a little bit about the blue economy. I'm not going to talk much about that because Boris has covered it in far greater detail and with a really expert level of insight. So I'm not going to talk about that too much. I'm going to talk about the projects I've worked on and some of the key principles for blue innovation. Next slide. Okay, 70%. We are surrounded by water, and 70% of the world is the oceans. So of course, there's a huge opportunity there. So this is just a quick recap of what Boris said. What is the blue economy? Well, it's renewables. We've heard just about Hydrowing, about Tidal. It's living resources, there's fisheries, there's the biotechnology. Of course, there's transportation, tourism, and shipbuilding, and the non-living resources such as oil and gas. Next slide. And it's a significant sector. We're looking at 5.4 million workers and over 500 billion of GVA. Next slide. But of course, it's very mixed. We've got very traditional industries such as the ports, such as shipbuilding, and then we've got more modern industries such as renewable energy. And of course, there's things like fishing and tourism in the mix. Next slide. And what is the backdrop to the blue economy? Well, obviously, we've got huge challenges. COP26 is ongoing as we speak. We've got climate change, we've got oceans polluted with plastic, and we've got the challenges of overfishing. And there's a younger generation with passion and energy, and this is bringing a lot of innovation and creativity, which gives opportunities for, next slide, a triple win. Investment opportunities which can deliver strong profitability, but with real social and planetary benefits. Next slide. Just quickly talking about some of the investment routes. We've touched on this already, but of course, green bonds came in 2007, and they've been followed by different bonds and blue bonds for the blue economy in 2018. Next slide. And if we look at the green bonds, those have grown very, very significantly as if investors have wanted to go to this area. And I'd expect a similar trend for blue bonds. Next slide. So that gives a really high line view. A couple of points on the blue economy, obviously covered in far more detail by Boris. So a couple of recent projects I've worked on. So on the left-hand side here, we see Penzance Dry Dock. This is the oldest dry dock in Europe. It's over 200 years old, and it was going to go bust, but it's just been taken over by a new organization, and they're investing in it. And this is incredibly well positioned for all the offshore energy opportunities in the southwest of England. And I've been working with that dry dock to look at their markets, to look at the opportunities, and to look at how they're going to target those markets to get the right type of working to create a sustainable future for that business. And then next we have the Hydrowing. We've just heard Bevan's great presentation talking about that, all the work behind that. Again, that was working with the team to understand the value chain, the business model, understand the key actions they need to take next to move to the next level with that technology. And I have no doubt the team will go far with that. On the right-hand side, that is an autonomous undersea survey vessel made by companies called Unmanned Survey Solutions. This business has developed this, and we work with them to think, what is the smartest way to take this to market? Do we want to sell boats? Do we want to sell the service? Or do we want to have a clever model which does a bit of both and gives that business a long-term competitive advantage? So I've been working with them. I've also done some other projects related to floating wind. And what I've taken from those projects is some key principles for innovation in the blue economy. So should we go to the next slide? So focus number one, whatever the innovation is, does it solve a problem which is a significant pain for the users, which is front of mind and people will be prepared to pay for? You sometimes get businesses who have a technology which they're passionate about, but it doesn't solve a big problem. And that's a non-starter in the innovation game. Next slide. So this could apply to any business, but its focus, it's understanding the business model. Is it a really smart business model? Something such as Airbnb, which creates values for the people who stay there, but also it creates value for the people who own the houses. I know that's a different sector, but it's a smart business model. So get the business model right. Focus on doing one thing, which is your core competence, and of course, systemize so you can create a scalable and strong business which is ready for investment. Next slide. Okay, couple of other big ingredients. Doing these big projects can rarely be done by one business working away. It will almost certainly be collaboration. Collaboration with organizations such as FanBest, with academic institutions, with other commercial businesses. And it's really important to find the right collaborations for your business. And you'll look at that, when you think about modeling your business model, that is key. Obviously, IP. If you've got good IP, protect it, look after it. It may be your competitive advantage. But I've also mentioned policy there. If we look at the wind industry and the solar industry, those were massively accelerated by policy moves and the subsidization of those energy forms. Now, in Bevan's presentation, it just showed that, for example, in the UK, there's such a huge opportunity for tidal energy, but we need the right policy instruments to come in and to accelerate that business. So yeah, really, really important, the policy side of it. Okay. So we've looked at the blue economy, we've spoken about a couple of projects, and we've come up with some key principles. So it's seeing the big picture. It's making sure the commercial side of your innovation is well mapped out. What's the business model? Exactly who is your customer, and what are the key benefits that you deliver? And then thinking about some of the technical aspects. What are your key technical challenges, and how can you move them forward? And then, of course, it's getting the right finance and investment to accelerate your project. So that is a really quick overview of some of the projects I've done and some of the key learnings. And that's it.
Thank you, Ben. That was very interesting, and it's great to hear about the work you've been doing with businesses like Hydrowing and actually seeing the results as well. So thank you. We'll move on to the Q&A, and we're actually right on time. So well done to our three speakers, because it's always hard to stick to the agenda. So thank you all three. I know there was some questions, Bevan, during your presentation about how the fishing community responds to such an infra below the surface. Do you have anything to?
Yeah, sure. I was just writing an answer, so I'm glad you asked that. Yeah, I mean, fishing industry is, and any local industry, maritime industry, is a key stakeholder in any of our projects. We don't want to design or implement any projects which interrupts or negatively impacts any of the existing maritime value chains in the area. Generally, what we find with tidal projects is that because tidal energy, you need fast flows, and these are some of the fastest flows that you'll find on the planet. having boats which can fish in those areas isn't, fishermen usually avoid the areas, is basically what I'm trying to say, because they're so dynamic and so dangerous. Or at least they're fishing in the areas when the turbines aren't operating. So the risk to sort of loss of life, I guess, is reduced through that aspect. But ultimately our devices are designed to try and limit interaction with any maritime users. So we have a surface clearance. Our turbines don't pierce the surface of the water, and there will always be designed in enough room plus more so that boats and maritime users can use the surface without any risk of collision with our devices. Hopefully that helps answer the question.
Oh, sorry.
But happy to provide more if they want to get in touch.
Thank you, Bevan. And Charles, if you've got any question, feel free to unmute yourself, or we can pick it up after the event as well, if you'd like to have a chat. If you've got any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and jump in straight away, or you can put them in the chat. I know Melanie was asking about your role in the business, Bevan, but you can either reply now or just reply in the chat. It's up to you.
Yeah, sure. My role is project and innovation manager. So I work mainly on developing projects to demonstrate our device, and also to develop projects for sort of commercial projects to implement, whether it's in Europe or around the globe, trying to find public and private investment or monies to progress our technology to commerciality, essentially.
Thank you. While we wait for some more questions, Ben, in your presentation, you mentioned product innovation. How important do you think business model innovation is as well to grow in the market?
Yeah, I think business model innovation is hugely important, because you can compete with a superior product, but if you have a cleverer, smarter business model, that's the best way to do it. And just to bring that to life, I quickly mentioned Airbnb. And if you think of hotel chains, all the hotel chains were doing their stuff, and they all had these big buildings where you went and stayed. And then somebody came in with a solution where which connected people who had space to people who wanted space with a different service. And that is an innovative business model. So with one of the companies I've been working with, they were thinking, could we sell this product, or do we deliver the service? Whereas actually we said, could we come up with a really smart subscription model where people with a certain product pay a subscription for some type of access, which gives a much more long-term revenue plan. So it's something which for every product you really have to think through carefully, but I think it's key.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben. I have a question for you, Bevan, and maybe Ben and Boris, as you work closely with businesses as well, you can kind of jump in. But do you have any tips or advice for businesses kind of starting in the blue economy, or any challenges you face that you have recommendations on how to overcome them?
Yeah, I think Ben sort of mentioned a bit on this, but I'd say that having a clear innovation and technology which answers a clear customer need or want is essential. I think Ben said you can have a great innovation which doesn't solve a problem, and therefore there's no market. So ensuring that you have a market, have a good understanding of that market, and then once you have that, it's getting the team around that technology and around that innovation, which has the experience, the knowledge, and the drive to progress it, which is really important when you're trying to gain traction as a new technology, especially when it's on the computer screen. It hasn't yet been proven. Having the right team members which have the experience and can prove that they can do it is invaluable, really.
Thank you. Ben or Boris, is there anything you want to add? We don't really have any more questions, or any final remarks or any comment you'd like to make following what Bevan just said? If not, it's okay.
Sorry, Ben.
No, Boris, you go for it.
I just want to say that I really fully share the tips that Ben has been highlighted about the innovation. That's what we see also here in France. So it's some of the main good practices have been really highlighted by Ben. What's specific about the blue economy is at some point those entrepreneurs will have to get wet, obviously, and they shouldn't be afraid to get wet, but they should do it at the right time. Quite generally speaking, going at sea, getting wet, as I said, is more expensive than doing something inland, and is more dangerous sometimes. It's more, say, difficult to get authorization or so on. So do it. Don't be afraid to do it, but do it right, and do it not maybe too early as well, because otherwise you may actually lose the right window to demonstrate your technology is a good one, and then it's going to be too late to recover from that, most likely. So timing is also important.
Yeah, I think the final thing I would say is there is a lot of expertise out there, is guidance, and there are people who will see your business from a different angle. Just as we work with Bevan, I think there's huge value in having those different perspectives, because you may be really strong at the technology, but you may not be strong at the commercial side, or vice versa. So things like FanBest and things are hugely useful to help plug those gaps and support you on your journey.
Thank you, Ben, Bevan, and Boris. That kind of leads me to my next slide, which is about the next events as part of this series. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about how to access business support and focusing on organizations that are helping businesses within the maritime industries. So we'll hear back from Boris and from Forum Oceano as well in Portugal, sharing their experience and their thoughts about how being part of such a network can help you kind of get to the next level. And then on Thursday, as mentioned earlier, we'll hear from private sources of funding, so organization such as a bank, a private investment group, and a crowdfunding company who are actively working with businesses in the blue economy, and that can help you kind of understanding more opportunities you may have to access those funding, and any advice they can provide. So I hope to see you all again tomorrow and on Thursday, and I hope that today was useful and helpful for everyone. If you've got any questions or anyone you'd like to speak to after the event, feel free to get in touch with ourselves. You should all have my details. And I know someone had a question about the slides. We'll be sharing a copy of the slides at the end of the week once all 3 sessions have been delivered. So again, thank you all. Thank you, Ben, Bevan, and Boris, for your very insightful presentation and your wise advice. So I hope everyone have a good day, and see you all very soon.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you, Pauline.